For as long as we've looked up at the stars, we've searched for meaning in their silence. Every telescope, every probe, every whisper of data we've sent into the void has carried one unspoken question. Are we alone? For centuries, the answer has always been the same, a cold, unbroken silence stretching between the stars. The universe, it seemed, was vast but empty, a cathedral of light without a voice. Until now. In early 2025, something began moving through our solar system. At first, it seemed like another comet, small, faint, another frozen traveler from the dark between stars. But when astronomers plotted its course, the numbers didn't behave. Its orbit wasn't random or chaotic, as every interstellar fragment should be. It was exact, too precise, too perfect, as if something had drawn it by hand. They named it 3IATLAS, the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected after Oumuamua and Borisov. But it would soon make those earlier anomalies look ordinary. For weeks, scientists at NASA and ESA debated the data. Comets from interstellar space are unpredictable. They tumble, they fragment, they burn away. But 3IATLAS did none of those things. Its trajectory followed the exact plane of the planets, the ecliptic, the thin, flat disk where Earth, Mars, and the others orbit the Sun. Statistically, that should never happen. The odds of a random interstellar body entering the solar system at such a shallow angle are less than 1 in 500. Every object before it had come in steep and wild, crossing the system like a thrown stone. But 3IATLAS drifted in with deliberate calm, sliding into the orbital plane like a spacecraft aligning for approach. The deeper astronomers looked, the stranger it became. Its orbital inclination, the angle of its path relative to the Sun's equator, wasn't the usual 40 or 50 degrees of a stray comet. It was 5, almost perfectly aligned with the structure of the solar system itself. Natural bodies don't obey those rules, artificial ones do. At first, the word impossible was whispered more than spoken. Scientists blamed chance, gravity, statistical anomalies, anything but intention. But then came the stability. Every recalculation of its motion produced the same result. No chaotic wobble, no gravitational drift. The orbit was locked, unwavering. The object wasn't being pulled, it was guiding itself. Natural bodies can't do that, but spacecraft can. When the James Webb Space Telescope turned its mirror toward the object, what it saw only deepened the mystery. 3IATLAS wasn't small. It wasn't even close to the fragile fragments we'd seen before. Webb's infrared data revealed a body 3 kilometers across, a mountain drifting through the dark, with a mass exceeding 70 trillion pounds. Too large, too solid, too intact for an object that had supposedly traveled light years through interstellar space. If it were natural, it should have been broken, cratered, pitted with age. But Webb's imaging showed symmetry. Not irregularity, not chaos, symmetry. Its brightness didn't fluctuate wildly as it rotated. That meant its surface was smooth, uniform, engineered. And then came the gas. At the edge of the Sun's influence, Webb detected a jet, a narrow stream of material erupting from the object's surface. That in itself wasn't strange. Comets vent gases when they heat up. But this jet wasn't pointing away from the Sun. It was pointing toward it. That shouldn't be possible. Solar radiation drives gases outward, always outward. But 3IATLAS was reversing that fundamental rule of thermodynamics. A jet of material moving against the Sun's pressure meant one thing: active control, regulation, purpose. In other words, propulsion. When Webb repeated its observation weeks later, the jet was still there. Same angle, same brightness, same precision. Not the chaotic sputtering of a melting rock, but a consistent exhaust, narrow, collimated, and steady. 10 times longer than it was wide. It was no longer behaving like a comet. It was behaving like a machine. Spectrographic readings only made the picture clearer and far stranger. Typical comets release water vapor, ammonia, and carbon monoxide when they heat up. 3 IATLAS released almost none of that. Instead, its emissions were dominated by carbon dioxide and nickel, an unnatural ratio never before recorded in space. Nickel, heavy metal, resistant to radiation. The kind of material used in spacecraft hulls and turbine alloys, the kind of substance designed to endure. And the surface itself reflected light in ways no known mineral could. Webb detected extreme negative polarization, meaning the light waves scattered in controlled directions as if manipulated by structured layers. That's not the signature of dust or ice. It's the behavior of a material engineered to handle light, to use it. For the first time, scientists began to whisper the unthinkable. What if this wasn't a comet at all? The official language stayed careful. NASA's press releases called it an anomalous interstellar object displaying unusual spectral and thermal properties. But behind closed doors, the tone shifted. The data was too consistent, the structure too stable. When Webb's infrared images were layered over the object's trajectory, one truth became impossible to ignore. Every movement of 3 IATLAS matched a predetermined pattern. No random forces, no gravitational slingshot that could explain it. It moved as though it were following a plan. It wasn't wandering. It was navigating. Each time its orbit was updated, the vector pointed along a path threading through the inner planets, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, one after another, as though conducting a survey of the solar system's key gravitational and magnetic fields. And it wasn't speeding up or slowing down as sunlight hit it. Its velocity remained constant, precise within a margin of error too small to occur naturally. That suggested compensation, a force counteracting radiation pressure and gravitational drag, something maintaining equilibrium. A drifting comet couldn't do that. A powered craft could. The conclusion was terrifyingly simple. Something out there was flying under its own control. By now, observatories worldwide were locked on its position. Each new dataset only reinforced the same story. 3 IATLAS was steady, symmetrical, deliberate. It did not behave like a rock. It behaved like a system. A structure designed to move through space without decay, without erosion, without error. In private discussions among mission analysts, a phrase began to circulate: controlled trajectory. Not an official term, not yet, but the first hint of a realization humanity was unwilling to face, that this was not a natural traveler. It was a construct, and it had come a very long way to be here. Still, no one said artificial on record. Not yet. But they didn't have to. The evidence was speaking louder than language. The object's jet kept firing against solar wind. Its orbit stayed unbroken, flawless. Its metallic ratios refused to fit any model of cometary origin. And its alignment with the solar plane, the perfect ecliptic path, remained absolute. As one researcher from the European Southern Observatory put it quietly during a press briefing that never aired, if this thing is natural, then nature has learned to build machines. Weeks passed. Observations continued. The data refused to change. 3 IATLAS wasn't an accident. It wasn't chaos shaped by chance. Every reading, every measurement, every photon of light it reflected told the same story. This was no comet. It was a construct. When scientists first traced the path of 3 IATLAS through the solar system, they expected randomness, an erratic arc, a tumble through gravitational chaos. But what they found instead was intention. The orbit didn't sprawl across space like the drunken line of a wandering comet. It folded, neatly through the same plane that holds every major planet, a perfect alignment with the ecliptic. And, as the weeks went on, that alignment held steady. Not even the pull of Jupiter or the solar wind's pressure made it drift. To understand what this meant, astronomers ran the math. The probability that a natural interstellar fragment could enter our solar system along this exact plane was less than 1 in 500. The probability that it could maintain that alignment for months without a single measurable perturbation was effectively 0. Something was keeping it there. Then came the flybys. 3 IATLAS passed near Mars. Not close enough for collision, but close enough to make scientists uneasy. The trajectory threaded through a narrow gravitational corridor that allowed a slingshot effect, a perfect maneuver for adjusting course. The same thing happened with Venus. And after that, Jupiter. 3 encounters, each one positioned with a precision that even our most advanced spacecraft would struggle to match. Orbital dynamicists ran hundreds of simulations. None produced a natural scenario that could explain it. Gravity alone couldn't choreograph this. The pattern looked calculated. And if there was calculation, there was intent. By the time the James Webb Space Telescope returned its second batch of infrared data, suspicion had turned into quiet dread. The object's jet, that narrow plume of gas directed toward the sun, hadn't faded. It had intensified, pulsing rhythmically every 6 hours, each burst identical in strength and duration, as though responding to something or powering a controlled maneuver. Webb's spectrometers detected changes in the chemical composition of that jet over time. The ratio of nickel to carbon dioxide fluctuated in a cycle that matched the object's rotational period, almost like an engine alternating fuel modes. The readings didn't show chaos. They showed engineering. Still, science demands evidence, not fear. So researchers went back through the data, looking for anything familiar. And that's when someone at Ohio State University noticed something chillingly precise. The coordinates from which 3 IATLAS entered the solar system aligned almost perfectly, within 9 degrees, with the origin of the most mysterious radio signal humanity has ever recorded. The WOW signal. August 15, 1977. A narrowband burst that lasted 72 seconds, focused, structured, and gone forever. For nearly half a century, scientists had debated its source. Some said it was a transmission from deep space. Others blamed interference or coincidence. But now, that debate had context. 3 IATLAS had come from almost exactly the same direction. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence. The galaxy is wide, and alignments happen. But when researchers mapped the timing, another pattern emerged. If the object had been traveling toward our solar system since the late 1970s, it would have been near interstellar space just beyond our detection range at the time of the WOW signal, which meant the signal could have been a marker. A message sent ahead, a call announcing the arrival of what was now quietly being called the Atlas object. The possibility rewrote everything. For decades, astronomers had assumed that if first contact ever came, it would come through communication, a beam of radio, a mathematical code, something deliberate. No one had imagined it might arrive disguised as a comet. Webb's images showed no sign of disintegration as 3 IATLAS neared the inner system. The surface remained intact. Its light curve showed almost no variation, implying perfect symmetry. The polarization patterns still indicated artificial microstructures that manipulated light. And now, its origin matched humanity's only credible hint of an extraterrestrial transmission. The question was no longer what it was who sent it. Behind closed doors, space agencies began to cooperate in ways they hadn't since the Cold War. Data from NASA, ESA, and Japan's Subaru telescope were merged into a single shared database. Analysts cross-checked historical infrared observations to see if anything like 3 IATLAS had ever passed through before. Nothing matched. It was unique. Then, as the object crossed the orbit of Mars, its velocity changed, but not the way gravity dictated. Instead of accelerating toward the sun, it maintained a constant speed, as if compensating for gravitational pull. A natural body cannot hold constant velocity under that force, but a powered craft can. One astrophysicist at ESA described it best. It's flying like it knows what it's doing. Meanwhile, the gas jet continued to pulse, always toward the sun. Every time the sun's radiation increased, the emission adjusted, regulating itself. No natural comet has ever done that. It was reacting to the star, perhaps even communicating with it, maintaining balance between energy and momentum like a living system. By mid-2025, the whispers turned to warnings. If the jet was propulsion, it could mean the object was altering its path deliberately, perhaps even slowing down. And if it was slowing down, it wasn't just passing through, it was arriving. In the search for correlations, scientists began re-examining the WOW signal using modern AI reconstruction algorithms. They mapped its narrowband frequencies across time and compared the pattern to the modulation of three IATLAS's current emissions. The match was uncanny. Both shared harmonic intervals at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line. The same frequency chosen for the golden record aboard Voyager, the universal constant of interstellar communication. Hydrogen, the element of life, the most abundant signature in the universe. It was as though whoever or whatever sent the signal had used the most obvious calling card possible, and the more they looked, the more the two phenomena seemed connected. The 1977 signal was short, lasting barely over a minute, but when stretched across the decades of travel time between its point of origin and 3 IATLAS's current position, its duration aligned perfectly with the object's inbound velocity. The message and the messenger were synchronized. A signal and then a visitor. By late summer, telescopes across the world began picking up faint gravitational distortions ahead of the object, light bending around nothing, a subtle warping of space like a wake left behind by an invisible ship. The phenomenon resembled gravitational lensing, but there was no mass dense enough to cause it. Whatever was distorting light was not gravity. It was energy, controlled, directional energy. The distortion followed the same rhythm as the jet's emission cycle, rising and falling in perfect synchrony. Space itself was flexing in time with the object's heartbeat. NASA refused to comment. The European Southern Observatory released a brief statement referring to non-gravitational perturbations of uncertain cause. But among those analyzing the data, the conclusion was spreading fast. 3 IATLAS was not being moved by the universe, it was moving through it. When Webb captured its next image, the light reflected from the object showed polarization patterns unlike anything in natural astrophysics. Instead of scattering randomly, photons bent coherently, almost as if the surface was controlling the angle of reflection. That property, known as anomalous retroreflection, has only ever been seen in metamaterials, synthetic structures engineered to manipulate electromagnetic waves. In other words, the surface of 3 IATLAS wasn't rock, it was technology. The conversation within the scientific community shifted from disbelief to containment. If this was a machine, what was it doing here? And why now? Some suggested reconnaissance, an automated probe mapping planetary systems for civilizations that might rise one day. Others believed it could be a dormant seed, activated only when it encountered a star of sufficient energy. A few, in private, whispered something darker, that 3 IATLAS wasn't searching for us at all, but monitoring something else, something older. Whatever the truth, its behavior was consistent with one thing only: design. By late 2025, it had become clear that 3 IATLAS was following a program, a route of impossible precision that carried it past 3 major worlds in exact gravitational sequence. Its final destination appeared to be the Sun itself. And if that were true, then humanity was standing at the edge of a revelation, or an encounter. No one knew which. The last Webb image before the object slipped behind solar glare showed a bright plume aimed directly at the Sun, burning with steady, unwavering light. In its reflection, faint interference fringes formed concentric rings, a geometry eerily similar to the 1977 WOW signal when plotted on a spectrograph. The same pulse, the same pattern, the same message. It was no longer coincidence. As one astrophysicist whispered while reviewing the data in disbelief, maybe it's not visiting us at all. Maybe it's returning. By October 2025, the object called 3 IATLAS had crossed inside Earth's orbit. For months, scientists had told the public that it was harmless, a harmless comet passing by on its way out of the solar system. But the data coming from the James Webb Telescope and the Parker Solar Probe said otherwise. The object wasn't slowing down anymore. It was stopping. The closer it came to the Sun, the more its behavior defied physics. Instead of burning brighter from heat, it darkened. Instead of venting material outward, its jet reversed direction again, pulling energy inward like a siphon. The sunlight around it dimmed by measurable degrees. Radiation readings dipped. It was as if the object were feeding on the star itself. NASA's solar division went into emergency mode. Parker's magnetometers began to register oscillations, rhythmic waves in the solar wind that matched the same 4.3-second pulse that Webb had detected months earlier. The sun was no longer emitting its normal, random stream of plasma. It was responding. And 3IATLAS was listening. On October 17th, the probe's field sensors captured something the human mind wasn't ready for. A region of plasma around the object that had stopped moving entirely. Absolute stillness in the breath of the sun. Not even magnetic fields can hold plasma motionless. Only one thing can: control. In those frozen seconds, the solar wind bent inward, folding around the object like cloth around a sphere, forming a perfect torus of suspended energy. Parker's readings flatlined, as if the sun itself had paused. What could make a star hesitate? When the data reached Earth, analysis revealed something stranger still. The object's reflected light was no longer uniform. It carried interference patterns, structured ripples resembling data encoding, a kind of optical Morse. When translated into binary, it didn't produce words or numbers. It produced geometry, spirals nested inside each other, ratios that repeated across golden means, logarithmic curves identical to those found in DNA helices and in the orbits of planets. It wasn't a message for us. It was a message about us. The conclusion grew unavoidable. 3IATLAS was not an inert relic drifting through space. It was an autonomous system, a machine operating on principles humanity could only begin to guess at. And whatever it was doing it inside the sun. As the object approached perihelion, its brightness changed again, no longer pulsing rhythmically, but in vast waves, arcs of reflected light that rippled across solar orbiters like radar echoes. The light patterns were too organized to be random. When plotted over time, they formed repeating harmonics that spanned frequencies across the electromagnetic spectrum, radio, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, as if one voice was speaking in every wavelength at once. The message was simple, elegant, and terrifying in its implication: resonance. 3IATLAS wasn't consuming energy, it was tuning it. By aligning itself perfectly with the sun's magnetic poles, it had created a stable interference field, a resonance loop that amplified solar harmonics and then re-emitted them outward. In other words, it was turning the sun into a transmitter, a living beacon. The realization spread quietly through mission control rooms across the world. Astronomers at the European Space Agency noticed that Earth's magnetosphere had begun to oscillate in sympathy with the solar field. The same 4.3-second pulse detected months earlier was now echoing faintly through our planet's upper atmosphere. It was here. But what was it sending? When the final sequence of Webb images arrived, hours before solar interference overwhelmed communication, they showed something extraordinary. The object had divided. Tiny fragments, too symmetrical to be debris, were emerging from its surface, 12 of them, equidistant, moving into stable orbits inside the sun's corona. They reflected no sunlight, emitted no heat, but each one pulsed faintly, synchronized to the central body. They formed a ring. Mathematicians noticed that the configuration matched the geometry of a dodecahedron, a 12-sided figure found in the patterns of carbon molecules, in crystal lattices, in the resonance frequencies of the human brain. Nature uses that symmetry to build complexity. So do engineers. The fragments stayed there for exactly 22 minutes, then re-merged with the main body. After that, the entire structure began to accelerate again, not outward, but downward, into the sun itself. Parker's final readings recorded a surge in magnetic field strength, followed by an emission of radio noise across every frequency humanity could measure. The waveform looked almost musical, not random static, but layered harmonics rising through octaves before fading into silence. When the light cleared, the object was gone. No trace of debris, no flare, just emptiness. But the sun had changed. Its plasma flows now carried faint but regular waves, subtle, organized oscillations repeating every 4.3 seconds. They weren't there before. Every solar monitoring instrument confirmed it. The rhythm was global, constant, steady. It was as though something had woven a heartbeat into the star. In the days that followed, speculation spread like wildfire. Was 3IATLAS a probe? A seed? A machine older than any civilization we could imagine, designed to activate dormant stars? Some believed it was building a network, a galactic lattice of resonant suns, each turned into a transmitter. Others thought it had simply gone home. Then, late in November, radio telescopes across Earth detected something new, a faint modulation riding atop the 4.3-second pulse. It wasn't coming from space, but from our own star. The pattern was prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, looping endlessly. A universal constant, the oldest language of intelligence. No one knew if it was a signature, a signal, or a test, but it was undeniable proof of intent. The sun was broadcasting, and whatever had placed that signal there had done so using a precision beyond our comprehension. Weeks later, as the oscillations stabilized, one final discovery closed the circle. The new solar pattern wasn't just random resonance. When translated into spatial coordinates, it mapped a trajectory, a straight line extending outward from the Sun through the orbits of Mars, Earth, and Jupiter. At its end, it pointed toward the same region of interstellar space from which the first three, IATLAS, had arrived. A beacon had been lit. The purpose remained unknowable, but its message was unmistakable. This had never been a one-way journey. Something had come here not to visit, but to connect, to make the Sun part of a larger system. And as the pulse continued to whisper through the fabric of space, one thought spread quietly through the halls of every observatory on Earth. Maybe the universe was never empty. Maybe it's filled with machines like this, sleeping inside the stars, waiting to wake when another mind looks their way. For centuries, we believed we were explorers, mapping the unknown. But standing now beneath a star that has begun to speak, humanity is forced to face a deeper truth. We are not alone. We never were, and somewhere in the light, something ancient has just remembered us. After 3 IATLAS, we will never look at the night sky the same way again.